Daf Tzadi Bet Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. Tashma. We're continuing the conversation about whether the entitlement that the worker has to food is not considered from Hashem, God-given gift, or is his own. It's not considered part of his wages. Tashma. We have a Breta. We're going to talk about it more in the Mishnah and next stuff. That if someone tells the worker, someone says, "You know what, my wife or my children who are working for you, give my entitlement, the fruits that I'm able to eat, give it to my wife and kids. That it doesn't work. You can't give it to yourself. Now, if you want to say that we say that, oh, when it's talking about workers, it's talking about a Nazir, which we just mentioned in the previous daf yesterday, we mentioned that when he mentions these cases referring to a Nazir, that's why he can't eat it. And then we said over there, we don't give it to the Nazir or his family because we don't want him dealing with a vineyard. The Gemara says, the Braita shouldn't have said that the reason why you don't keep it is because it belongs to you and not anybody else, but rather it should have said that we don't give it to Nazir. Seemingly that this Braita is referring to an actual worker and not a Nazir, unlike our previous answer. The Gemara says, it's true. It is considered a Nazir. Since we're talking about the Braita is referring to a case of worker, we brought a proof from the Pasuk that even though it sounds like a worker, but even so, it's talking about a Nazir, and that's why you can't give it to him because the Nazir is being penalized that he should not be working there, and therefore you can't give it to his wife or kids. Tashma. Someone hired a worker to spread out the figs to dry. The worker can eat from it and he's not chayav maaser because since the figs were planted for drying, then they're not considered fully processed and therefore they're not chayav maaser. Let's say the guy says, you know what, I'll work on condition that I can eat and my son can eat, or my son shall eat instead of me. He is patur, he can eat and he's patur from maaser, but his son can eat and he's chayav. Now the Gemara says, now, if the worker is considered like his own, is considered his own portion of eating, then Hakam is Hayav and son is Hayav Maaser. Gemara says, because he worked out a deal that his son's eating, it looks like a purchase, and purchases are Hayav Maaser. Tashma, if someone hired a worker to work with his neta v'rab'ai, so when a person plants a fruit tree, first 3 years are asur because of orla. The 4th year, those fruits have a deen similar to Maaser Shani, take them up to Yerushalayim. They're called Neta Rab'ai, fruits of the 4th year. So if you're hiring a worker to work with those fruits, he can't eat it because it has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Let's say the guy didn't let him know. So therefore, the employer didn't let the worker know that he's dealing with Neta Rab'ai. And therefore, the worker has no idea that he's working in a fruit location that he cannot eat from. The employer has to redeem the fruit in order to feed it to him, because otherwise it's not fair. Now, if you want to say that the worker gets God-given gifts of fruits, why does he have to redeem it for him and feed it to him? Let him say, listen, if he wants to eat these fruits, he can eat it. But he can't eat it because it is sword. So, tough luck. It's a God gift, but he can't eat the gift. No, over there, the reason why he can still eat it is because, and you have to redeem it from him, is because it looks like a false sale, meaning the guy may not have taken the job if he knows he wasn't able to eat. The second part of the Mishnah says, if someone had fig cakes or wine casks that were opened, both of these things are considered processed already. They just need to be fixed again. Right? Wine and casks and fig cakes are considered processed already, and therefore they have maaser. Therefore, the guy can't eat it. And if he's not informed the worker that they're chayav maaser, you have to put that and let him eat it. Or it says, if you want to say it's a God-given right, why does it have to feed it to him? Just say that it's his right to eat from the Torah. Hashem gave him this, but he can't eat it because he needs maaser. Where it says no. If you want to tell me that it's because of the mekach ta'ut, also the same answer we gave before of a false sale, you can't say that. True. The fig cakes, maybe that's why he can't eat the fig cakes. However, it doesn't apply by the wine cask. because loose figs, maybe the guy doesn't know that it was already processed. Therefore, there's no mekach ta'ut. There isn't mekach ta'ut, sorry. However, and then if it's on a cask, once the wine's in the cask, obviously, it was already processed. Maybe the other dive killed the maser. He already knows the maser, so therefore he knows what he signed up for. Where it says, no, the cask had spilled, and he put the spilled wine into the bore, into a pit, or into a container. So now the guy doesn't know that inside the container was a chayav maser already. Right, but one second. Right, says that when wine goes into a container, chayav. Rabbi Akiva, no, we're going to Rabbi Akiva, who holds that the time you have for wine is when you take off the substances and the skim of the fruits from the top of the surface. So when the wine's fermenting, the leftovers floats to the top. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva holds you're not chayav till it goes to the top. And therefore, the worker can tell the employer, I didn't know that your wine was already skimmed, and therefore I didn't know that it was already chayav maaser, and therefore to make a talit. The employer could have told him, you should have checked or asked or known that it was already skimmed. The Gemara says, no, the person who draws the wine into the casks is the one who skims the wine. And therefore, when the guy sees the container, it wasn't put into cask yet, and therefore he thinks it wasn't skimmed yet. He has no reason to believe that it's still chayav maaser. Now the Gemara says, "Bahashtu Tanya is Yain Mishnah the Border be Cafe." According to this rabbi, and the Brata says that wine that is chayav maaser when it goes into the container and he has to skim it. Rabbi Akiva holds when you take off the foam that comes into wine that pours in. Apparently, if you pour a lot of wine in something, there'll be a foam. When you take off that foam, that's when it's chayav maaser. After too much, you don't even tell me that the casks didn't open into the pit. You can even say it was just simply unsealed, like in the original case. And you could say, I'm little how they didn't. Actually, we could say you didn't know that the foam was taken off. You should have told them. You should have. Maybe you could answer him back. We said earlier, you could have checked. Could have asked. Where it says, no, we could refer to a place where the guy who seals the cask is the one who draws it off. Similar answer, and therefore they had no reason to believe that it was chayav maaser yet. Tashma, person can make a condition for himself. For his adult son or daughter. Or for his adult slave or slave woman. For his wife. Meaning, if these people are working for someone else, they can make a deal. The husband or the owner can make a deal. That's from the adults that they're entitled to fruits can come to me or pay me instead of those fruits. Because they have the understanding to make the transaction. But not minors, kids, or slaves. Not for his animal, also because no dot. Like says, right now we're assuming you're talking about a case where he's providing them with support, and therefore he's entitled to their wages. Right, a parent who's supporting his adult child, the child practically has a din of katan because he's being supported by his father. And therefore, the father being entitled to the wages still. Not like nowadays where we work in camp when we're 12 and we get all the money and our father pays us to work there. Now it makes sense to say that the workers' fruits belong to God, God-given gift. That's why you can't do it by you can't make that condition. But if it belongs to the worker, then the minor also should be able to transfer over to the adult. Where it says, it's referring to the case where he does not support them. That's why you can't take it away from the minor. Whereas if that's the case, then he shouldn't be able to take the fruits from the adult kids or adult slaves. Where it says that it's true, but the adult ones are able to waive their right and be mochel to the guy. Where it says, okay, says, you can work for the adult children and slaves, but not for the minors, and it can work for the Kanani, non-Jewish slave or Solomon with its adult child. Now, my love, was referring to a case. Now, it sounds like it's a case where it's referring to where he's supporting them. The Hakamifli, the Machlokas is as follows: the more Savar, Vishlohu Ochel, more Savar, Shemash Ochel. The Tanakh the Braita holds that he's eating of his own fruits and therefore he can transfer over. And this Tanakh the Mishnah holds that he's belongs to God and therefore it cannot transfer over. So no, not a proof. The Mishnah, even the Mishnah would hold that it belongs to the worker. There's no contradiction. In the Mishnah, or he's not providing them food, therefore it doesn't transfer over to him. Braita is referring to he does support them and therefore he can take their wages. Why do you have to say that it's referring to a case specifically where he's supporting them? If that's the case, then the children, the minor kids also should be able to take it if it's supporting them. How come he can't do it for the minors? Gemara says, the reason why, even though he's supporting the minors, he still can't make the condition that he gets their fruits is because the whole reason why we allow the worker to eat the fruits because he's suffering. I'm dealing with these luscious grapes and stuff, and I can't eat them. Torah says you can eat them because the person's going to suffer. The father has no business in making his children suffer for nothing, and that's why it can't transfer over. Very big concept. We don't own our kids. We watch our kids, and therefore we can't force our kids to suffer. Next question. How come we established our Mishnah that he's not supporting them? That makes sense according to the opinion who holds that a person can tell his non-Jewish slave, work for me, and I still won't support you. So whether or not work. Shapir. That fits our Mishnah because he could refer to a case where he's not supporting the slave, as we just said, and he can still get the fruits. But according to the opinion who holds that he can tell him, work for me, and I won't support you. Opposite, sorry. The Mishnah is referring to the case where he does not support him, and that's why he can't take the minor slave's stuff. Now, if he does support him, right, the Gemara's question, if he does tell him, I work for me and I'm not going to support you, how come he can't transfer over the wages? Same thing, the fruits. Referring to both cases, no support. As follows. One opinion holds that the master can tell him, I'm not supporting you, and work for me anyhow. Another holds the person's view can't do it. And that's why it works with the fruits or not. 1 second. The master, who holds the master can tell the slave does not support him without supporting him. Does that mean he's going with the Braita to go against the Mishnah? How does that make sense? The Mishnah says the opposite. It says, again. Really, everybody holds Mishnah and Braita, the gifts of the fruits of work is God-given right. And therefore, the master can't take it away from even the minor slaves. What does Yeshua mean? Hoshea mean that he can take the rights of the food from? Doesn't mean the rights of the fruits that he's able to eat while he's there, but rather food. Meaning, I'm making a deal with you that I will feed my slave before he comes to you, so you don't have to feed him, and you pay me for that. You reimburse me for that. 1 second. The Gemara says, 1 second. But then regarding an animal, why can't you do that for an animal? I'll pre-feed my animal hay, and then I'll give you the animal. How come you can't do that if that's the case? If it's talking about I'm going to feed my item before giving it to you, like the slave, how come it doesn't work by an animal? I'll pre-feed my animal before he works for you. Gemara says, num way explaining anything. Num way machoket. The more savar mishlohu ochel, or more savar mishashamayim ochel. Machoket is based off of who holds what. The Braita holds a worker eats his own gifts, and the other one, Mishnah, would hold that the gift is from Hashem. New Mishnah, thank God. We quoted this earlier. A small person can make a condition for himself. For adult children, or adult slaves, for his wife. Because they have understanding to transfer it over to him. But he can't do it for his minor kids. Not for his minor slaves. Not for his animal. Because they can't understand. Word for word what we just quoted the previous stuff. Now, Hazakar that only also benefit of Aishlo, someone has workers for the United Arab, the fourth year fruits, like we mentioned earlier. We can't eat them. But if he did not afford them, he has to redeem it because it's not fair. They didn't know. And also the cakes and the wine casks, if it's previously open, he can't. They can't eat it. And if they didn't know when they sign up, he has to feed them. And we mentioned earlier, how do they not know if they see a wine cask or a fig cake? We mentioned obviously where they were still unaware, and therefore it's mekach ta'ut, and therefore he has to feed them. Nuruli, shomrei perot ochlin mehelchot medina avalom menatura. Those who are guarding fruits, fruit watchers, they are able to eat from conventional halachot, like local halachot, but not midoraita. We'll explain why. Gemara says, shomrei perot, watchmen of fruits. That only applies to ones who guard gardens and orchards. They're the ones who are able to eat. But those who are guarding wine presses and unprocessed fruits can eat that. So eat and drink. Min doraita. Because Rav holds that watching is like working. That only applies by wine and fruits that you're able to eat without from local laws, not midoraita. One who's guarding orchards and gardens doesn't need at all because Shmuel holds that guarding is not working, and therefore he has no right to it. So halacha is whoever's watching the para aduma, he's watching it. He's considered the one of the ones who are dealing with it, and whoever deals with it becomes tameh after the fact. His clothing become tameh after the fact. Now, what do we see? If we just said Shmuel that watching is not doing work, how come he's considered one of the people involved and he should not become tameh? It's true. Watching by itself may not be considered working, but we're afraid that he may have physically assisted the animal, let's say squeezing into a gate, he may have helped it through, and therefore that's considered physically helping. Someone's guarding 4 or 5 squash fields owned by 7 people. And he can't eat from one of them specifically, only. He has to eat proportionally per field. But yeah, if you want to say that the guarding is not like working, why is he eating it all according to Shmuel? Where it says it, it's referring to uprooted fruits, and Shmuel would agree they're able to eat there. Akurin, 1 second, uprooted. If that's the case, then they have maaser. Where it says, oh, we had this earlier. The blossom, the thing that's attached to the top, they didn't fall off, and therefore it's not chayav maaser. Maravashi Shmuel must make sense according to Shmuel. Tan be'elu ochli the following workers eat midoraita. Someone who works with fruits attached to the ground while it's working, or with detached fruits. It sounds like there are people who eat not because of Torah, but rather because of local laws. Now the Seifa says, the following people don't eat. What does it mean they don't eat at all? If it sounds like they don't eat only not midoraita, but from local laws, we just mentioned that's the first case. So rather, they don't eat at all. What's that case? Someone who works with fruits attached to the ground, and it's not the end of the work. And sure, those who are just guarding those things are not able to eat. Proof, according to Shmuel. There are 4 types of watchmen. We mentioned this so many times in the first 90 plus dapim of this Masachet. I wish it was in the beginning. But now we're going to go into there are 4 types of watchmen. Shomer Chinam, a unpaid watchman. Shu'el, a borrower. A paid watchman. And a renter. Shomer Chinam Nishba ala kol, unpaid watchman has the least responsibility. All he has to do is swear that he was not negligent, and he is patur. A borrower pays for practically anything. A paid watchman and a renter swear that the animal either broke his leg or was captured by armed bandits, which is beyond a regular accident. It's an unavoidable accident, or it died naturally, also unavoidable. But they would be held for loss or theft because that's a semi-onus that should have been avoided. Who was the Tana that holds there's 4 watchmen? Amar Nachman Meir is according to the mayor. Now the Gemara says, Amar Rahman, what do you mean? The Torah says there's four watchmen. What do you mean? It sounds like there's someone else no does not hold four watchmen. What are you talking about? The following question I had. Man Tana Socher Kinose Sachar Rabbi Meir. Who is Tana or Mishnah that says that the renter is like a paid watchman? They have the same halachot. That's Rabbi Meir. Because Plan never specifically said the halachot of a renter. And therefore, Rabbi Meir is the one who holds, Rabbi Meir holds that the renter and the paid shomer have the identical halachot. Or it says, we have a different writer that says, Tanya, so what does the renter pay? That Meir Omer Kishomer Chinam, unpaid watchman, or Omer Kishomer Sachar. The Meir holds over here that they can pay unpaid watchman. Where it says, the opposite, that Meir held that he was like a paid watchman, like we just said. What do you mean? If you're saying that the two the same thing, that the renter and the paid watchman are the same thing, then there's three watchmen, not four. It says, it's true. Two of them have the same halachot. Therefore, there's three halachot, but there are four separate watchmen. It just happens to be that two of them have the same halacha. Amen.